4 new rangers for 3 years to carry out essential track maintenance, fence maintenance and fence upgrades. Thank you.
Kia ora, Warwick, thank you. And Rosie?
Tēnā koutou, ko Rosie Aho. Volunteers are very much at the heart of our project. They contributed 13,000 hours to the project last year, so that equates to 7 full-time staff. And by volunteering, you actually do get benefits as well. So, if you'd like to move to the next slide, we were able to quantify the benefits to volunteers in a survey that we did. We engaged with Hoover Social and Impact Hub, and over the last 12 months, we had run a survey across 3 groups: the volunteers, our local community, and our wellbeing program participants. Locals were defined as within sight of the mana. And these are some of the results hot off the press. Statistical analysis has shown a meaningful relationship between being able to visit Sanctuary Mountain and the Maunga, and as frequently as desired, and higher overall well-being. Volunteers scored feeling part of the community significantly higher than the local community does. So Sanctuary Mountain is fulfilling a need for community connection. Volunteers who've been with Sanctuary Mountain for 3 or more years or come out often, so more than once a month, had significantly higher well-being than less regular or newer volunteers. And priority needs of wellbeing program participants saw increase after taking part in the program, and outcomes were correlated to higher wellbeing. So those are fantastic results for us. Next. And this is just the program. So Rongo Rākau is led by a local kuia, and she's a practitioner, and it's got a beautiful authenticity to it, and it's been really popular. Our wellbeing celebration, which we did in the middle of Omicron, it was great, and we got good feedback on that. Meditation we've done for the last couple of years. We do a day one, and we did a moonlight meditation this year. And then the forest immersion programs, we do a public version, but it's mainly aimed at corporates, and that is around employee wellbeing. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosie. And if I could ask Owen now to come and share with everybody, and this is the detail of the specific funding around our biosecurity mahi on the Maunga. Over to Owen.
Kia ora tātou, Owen Woodward, Biosecurity Team Leader. Next slide, please. Okay, so we have 4 key goals, biosecurity goals, and I'll outline how the work that we do to deliver on those goals. So firstly is to ensure that no pests enter the sanctuary via the pest-proof fence. So the pest-proof fence is a key piece of infrastructure that enables all of the associated ecological biodiversity and community benefits that are gained from the project. It's a major piece of infrastructure that requires constant monitoring, regular inspection, maintenance, and repair. Now, to ensure that no pests can enter the sanctuary, the fence must be monitored 24/7, and rangers must be able to respond to all breach warnings within the 90-minute time frame. There are 33 warning gates that are monitored electronically, but in addition must be regularly checked, and this is often 2 or 3 times per week, especially through the wetter times of the year, as the stream flow can fluctuate. Maintenance is often required on surveillance boxes, replacing batteries. There are 185 fixed screen culverts that must be checked quarterly. There are 57 pedestrian gates, 12 vehicle gates. This is the infrastructure, the scale of the infrastructure that we must maintain. So there are also roads that must ensure access to all these pieces of fence line. and this is often on very steep terrain and requires maintenance of road surfaces, drains, replacements of metal, and likewise for internal roads, the quad track, and monitoring lines. The fence line must be kept clear of vegetation at all times in order to prevent pests from using it to gain entry, and to keep the surveillance wire clear in order for it to be operational and for its monitoring to be effective. So all roads, tracks, and monitoring lines must also be kept clear of vegetation, another large piece of work. So in order to prevent the reinvasion of pests, incursions must be quickly detected and invaders eradicated as soon as possible in order to prevent them establishing within the sanctuary. And to do this, a monitoring network is operated by staff and includes many volunteer hours, which helps us achieve this vital goal. Our second key biosecurity goal is to have a state of preparedness for any incursions or threats to the integrity of the monga. So this requires rangers to be able to and willing to respond at all hours in all conditions and to be highly familiar with accesses. So in the middle of the night and inclement weather, we're able to get to anywhere on that fence line where there may be a tree through the fence. So we must have vehicles that are capable of making it to all of these locations, equipped with the tools and materials to remove fallen vegetation, fix or replace damaged fence, or erect a temporary fence for the night. And over the past financial year, there have been 15 major fence breaches, and a number of those have been pulled together at the same time, which of course puts quite a strain on rangers, but it's a challenge that we enjoy responding to. We relish. So thirdly, the goal of ensuring the predator and herbivore pest-free status of the monga is maintained. So key to this is the pest monitoring network. So we have a monitoring network of a huge number of tracking cards, and we employ a number of other methods. Quarterly, we place 3,849 tracking cards over the monga. We have 388 rat traps and 648 dock traps that are regularly serviced. So it's our goal that we'll maintain a network of predator trapping within the monga capable of intercepting 100% of any incursions. So this is achieved yep, thank you. I'll go back to the previous slide in a minute, but this outlines our monitoring network. So you can see that puts it into scale how many of these stations that we have, and this is between 50 and 100 meters between those dots. So we have volunteers and rangers out there all the time covering that landscape. So yeah, we achieve the removal of any incursions 100% of the time, and that's achieved through high density. This is to get pests to zero density. We have a high density of monitoring and a regular servicing of fence line traps. In addition to keeping Maungatautari pest-free, we also work to remove the control invasions of exotic pest plants that can threaten the native forest ecosystem. And we have GIS mapping systems that monitor this. So just go back quickly to the back two slides.
So have you got much more to go? Unfortunately, you're going to be the last speaker.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's actually. Yep.
Ka whai?
Hi. Kia ora, Owen, thank you. And could I just please have 2 minutes just to round off the financials, and then I will promise.
1 minute.
Thank you. Could you please just go through 2 full slides on to the tree? Next one, next one, next one. Thank you. I'll be very quick. So I'd like now to share with you how this translates in our partnerships, translates into funding relative to our partners' sanctuary operating budget and our proposal to the Natural Heritage Partnership Programme. Thank you. Next slide. As reported in our summary partnership report, the last 4 years have seen Sanctuary Mountain working to increase the capacity and capability of our sanctuary team. This graph relates to the last 4 years of funding from Waikato Regional Council, projected budgets and actual expenditure. The trend shows increasing sanctuary-related expenditure for all of our fence track maintenance work, additional team members, staff training, supporting health and safety systems. Slight dip in 2020 represents COVID, where we were unable to complete some activities, but we made up for that in the ensuing years. Next slide, please. This graph shows the first year of our funding request, which is just over $1 million, has been the theme throughout our presentation today. Partnership is the key, with funding contributions also from Waikato District Council, Jobs for Nature, community funders, and visitor revenue. Next slide, please. And now our amazing volunteers. As the team have alluded to, volunteering brings many benefits. This includes economic, and as Rosie mentioned, this equates to $275,000 worth of volunteer hours annually. Next slide, please. This drills into the budget that's in the application. And I just draw your attention to the fact there are many partners involved in this contribution to the Maunga. And one area that in our application talks about communication and education. And although that is included in our application, that is not included in our funding request to Waikato Regional Council. So many people contributing to the kaupapa. Next slide, please. So finally, this slide shows Sanctuary Mountains' actual and projected expenditure from 2018 to 2026. The first 4 years have been detailed earlier in the slides. Please note the jump of expenditure at the end of this year from $850,000 to $1,026,000. This is due to the Jobs for Nature funding and cadetships providing full-time rangers. Important considerations are the impact of inflation, the risks of climate change, and an aging fence. The reality is that any multi-year funding of a longer horizon goes backwards without an inflationary adjustment. This year is a good example with CPI at 7%. To help mitigate this impact, Sanctuary Mountains' application has built in a 3% annual increase to funding. This is illustrated in gold on the graph and in the application. Next slide, please, and I'm finished. So in summary, through our partnership, the technical support and funding provided by the Waikato Regional Council lays the foundation to deliver our theory of change and contribute to a region where Maunga Tautari Maunga is a sacred source of spiritual pride and prestige for mana whenua. Endangered native fauna, waterways and flora are healthy and thriving. Forest recreational activities enhance the physical, mental and spiritual well-being of children, adults, older adults in our region. Mana whenua actively connect with and use their land for social, cultural and economic well-being. Jobs are created, as we've shown, with conservation, education and tourism contributing to the Waikato economy by telling our ecological and cultural story. And finally, vitally important, our tamariki understand their role as future kātiaki. Kia ora. Thank you. Next slide, please.
Kia ora koutou. Our questioning is going to be very quick as we have a time limit now, and I've given you more time for your presentation and less time for questions. But I do believe that presentation will be going out to councillors anyway, and that's great. Great presentation, guys. Questions? Quick, sharp, to the point. Fred.
Have you got any land snails? No land snails, yet to come. Third question, I noticed Plant Plus biosecurity areas being covered. I congratulate you for that and being in front line. And third, where's my gold button?
You just used it and broke it.
I just used it. All right, thank you.
Kathy.
Yeah, thank you. Look, you've done really well, and I think you know, you've got such a good track record, and especially over recent years. And I just want to point out that we do have a lot of pride in this project, and the community input and the commitments from everybody. So I just want to say that. I did have some questions about the predator-proof fence, but I think you have covered it in there. My question mainly was just, are you so you're putting money aside regularly for the replacement of the fence, and you're doing that on a regular basis. So I just wanted to check that there wasn't going to be you know, you coming to us later for a large sum of money specifically for the fence. That was the one question, but the other one, if I could just ask it at the same time, is just, I mean, I have raised this with you before, but I'd just like to know whether you've made any changes in the sanctuary in relation to this. I know there have been wildlife deaths in sanctuaries when people have used brodifficum poison in their bait stations. You know, places like the Kaka at Pukaha, Tuatara from eating poisoned cockroaches down at Natureland in Nelson. And I know you did have a takahe that accessed bait from your bait station. So I'd really just like to know if you've made any changes, what changes have you made, or at least what have you considered to try and reduce the risks to the wildlife that you're trying to protect in there?
Could I first answer about the fence?
Yes.
And then I'll hand over to the team.
Thank you.
If I could have somebody with an answer, please. Yeah, so in terms of the fence, I think we recognise that the significance of the capital outlay, 2035 from memory is when we, you know, it was sort of getting to the end of needing replacement. So part of the work that Warwick was describing around the cadetship and Jobs for Nature. So what we've started doing is replacing a kilometre annually, and then all that information is being stored in GIS so that we've got a permanent record of fence that's been replaced. So rather than coming with a request for 25 million in 20 years' time, we're actually just replacing, and it's just going to be an ongoing process now, so we know exactly what every piece of fencing is, the condition it's in, and the age of it. So just slow and steady rather than a big ask. And that's covered in that operating.
Who's answering the other question?
And the other?
Yeah, as for the brodifficum,
You want to come closer? We've got people online.
Yeah.
And can you keep your answer precisely?
Yeah,
so
sure.
that
As for the brodifficum, we are still using brodifficum. We're using less. We're using difascinone and double tap as well, so to use less brodifficum. And the bait stations in the takahe enclosures, they have been modified to be very secure for takahe.
Right. Yes. So I think you used to have bait stations like every 150 metres or something, didn't you? But it looked to me like you were saying they're just around the actual external fence line now. Is that
Yes.
right? Is that what I'm
We actually have bait stations around the fence line every 50 metres,
Right.
but they are now only used when we have an incursion.
Right, okay. So are you trying to actually reduce your brodifficum? Is that a goal of yours, that you're trying to do that because you recognise there are some risks?
Yes, the goal is, I believe the target is to only use brodifficum once during the lifetime of the longest lived native species in the area, and we use difascinone largely for our pest responses now, but we also do use brodifficum.
Thank you.
Excellent. I'm going to close it down now. Your time, you've been bang on time, and send that I close it all off. But thank you for your presentation, guys. And as per usual, you know, Maungatautari Sanctuary Mountain is exactly what everybody says it is. There is not much I can say. So After we finish today, there's a big space of time where we will go through deliberations as a council. And I don't know how long between now and when you get an answer. How long are we waiting at? A week? 5 days? You should have an answer back in at least a week or so on the outcome of today. Okay? So, thank you, everybody.
Kia ora, thank you very much for your time and allowing us to go over our time in our presentation as well. So, kia ora.
Kia ora koutou. They're out, we bring them in. So just to be on the same page. Just to be on the same page, I do believe the next lot of people is what, 10 minutes for presentation and how long for questions? Okay, couple, yep, okay. Yep. That's okay. So if the next lot is ready, it'll be great. And they're running in line with the paper you gave us, say the next one here is the Nature Heritage Fund. Yep, I got them here. Yep. Yeah, we're doing this. Okay. And we'll start when she's ready. When she's ready, and I'll do a. You don't go through that introduction, do you? No, I'll just make sure they all know who's around the table. Kia ora korua, are you nearly ready? I don't want to rush you, it's okay. I'd just like to introduce our table to you, our staff, and who you might not know, and there are people online. Okay, so welcome to today. We look forward to your presentation. As you know, your presentation is only supposedly to be 10 minutes, then we've got so many minutes for questions. So I'm going to quickly go around the table and tell you who we all are, and then you can have a short time to introduce yourselves as well, okay? So at the end there, you've got Kathy White, who's the councillor for Taupo, Stu Newbone, who's the councillor for King Country and Waipa, Fred Litchwark, who's a councillor for Raglan, and Dennis Teague, who's the councillor for Coromandel Thames area. And online we have Barry, if he's still there, he's our chair, but was unable to come in. He's for Hamilton. Angela Strange, she's also Hamilton councillor, and Pamela Story, who is Waikato Huntley area. I'm Katarana Hodge. I'm one of the two Māori councillors, and my area is Katai Nauta. On this side is Greg Ryan. He is the director for ICM, right? And of course at the back is, and this gentleman here is really important to how the meeting goes and doesn't go. This is David, and everybody else around the table is staff, and of course our manager at the back of the Ramakesi services. So welcome to the table. It's now your time. We do have a timer. I'll try not to be rude and interrupt you, but you do have 10 minutes. All yours.
Kia ora koutou. Ko Doriglio ho, I lead the team at GoEco. Next to me is Karen Barlow, who's a community organised biodiversity predator-free person. And behind me is Paul Drake, who may be known to many of you, local legend in biodiversity and restoration. We're pleased to be here today to support this application and hope that we do not require the full 10 minutes actually. we are a little bit rushed. We have been, well, I have been planting at Mangaonua this morning, so I'm a little bit rattled, so please bear with me. The GOECO, or the Waikato Environment Centre, is supporting this project through capability and capacity building. Bush to Burbs is a collaborative project. Can you have the next slide? Thank you. We don't have many slides. It's a collaborative project for biodiversity protection, and the area of this project is focused around Maunga Tautari Sanctuary and between there and Cambridge. The collaboration is to distinctly work with landowners and to support the development or the increase there of native bird life specifically in the Cambridge Township area and the rural areas surrounding that. It's an extensive collaboration that includes predator-free Cambridge. For technical advice, you can see it all there. There's an expert steering group which is made up of local landowners and a further 200 properties that are stakeholders in this project. Ngāti Koraki Kahukura, that is a developing relationship. The local marae is also part of that. And of course, Waikato Environment Centre provide the administration and employment infrastructure to support the project. Over the past 2 years during development of this project, that has been happening on a small scale, and the conversations have commenced and been started and supported through that process. So there is some of this work happening on a small scale, and the reason that we're here today is to try and scale this project up. The next slide. One of the challenges that we have with projects such as this is funding. So I just want to say and acknowledge the staff here that we appreciate the opportunity to tono for funding to increase the impact of this project. Scaling up has that effect. It has the effect of increasing impact. And I'm going to pass over to Karen, because Karen knows far more about what happens out there than I do.
Hi. Bush to Burbs is only happening because of the amazing work that's being done at Sanctuary Mountain. If it wasn't for that, this project wouldn't be going ahead. Birds and bats are spilling over the fence as it is now. Bush to Burbs connects the Maunga, the work being done on the Maunga, the regionally significant Turahonga Halo project, which is already a Waikato Regional Council project, and the mahi of the work that's being done by Predator-Free Cambridge. In Cambridge, there's backyard trapping programs. We've got 50 volunteers doing community trapping over 9 sites in the Waipa area. Bush to Burbs combines those 3 projects, and it equates to a huge area of managed land if Bush to Burbs goes ahead further than what it currently is. It's a unique site of 11,500 hectares. We have 2 natural boundaries. Almost half of the boundary is Waikato River, and obviously the Maunga makes up part of a large part of the boundary as well, which is predator-proof. The area is primarily farming with increasing numbers of lifestyle blocks. There's 12 covenants within the area, 200 properties, but really only 160 landowners, and that's key. There's 4 hubs, Maunga Tautari, Horahora, Kairangi and Rotorangi, we've lumped together, and the Leamington Link hub. We have a steering group of locals which are knowledgeable of the living in the area, and you'll hear from Paul shortly. Farmers, restoration experts. There's a lot of people already doing predator control. There's a lot of people doing restoration work such as planting in the gullies, fenced off areas and restoring wetlands. So there's already a lot of work being done in the area before we're coming into the picture. Farmers particularly are already doing lots of predator control, mostly toxins, use of toxins, but there are traps out there as well. So the steering group is key because they're living on the land, as it were. They were well respected in the community and known in the community. It's not a whole lot of strangers coming in and saying, hey, this is what you need to do. It's about the landowners saying, this is what we'd like to do. How can we help? How can you help us? We're committed to developing a genuine relationship with iwi, and that's an ongoing process. We don't want it to be just a tick-the-box relationship. We actually want an authentic relationship, so we're working on that all the time, which we're really excited about. If we can go to the next slide, thank you. So we're using trap.nz app, which is probably well known to a lot of you. So this map represents, if you have a look at the bottom of the page, the Maunga. You can see the Waikato River as our border and a vague dotted line about approximately where our the boundary is. So the red dots represent the traps, and whether or not you can tell on there, there's about 500 traps out there at the moment that I have on the map. There's more. There's also about 120 bait stations, which aren't shown on this map. This is a great tool to see where the gaps are, and it looks a bit gappy at the moment, but not all the traps are on the map at this stage because it's still early days in our project. But to note, we've only funded 100 traps out there. So those other 400 traps and 120 bait stations are already out there before we've even started. Plus, like I said, there's a whole lot more that aren't on the map. I know it's not all about stats and catching things, but people like to know about catching things. So there's the monthly stats from May, and that's a lot of pests that are coming out just in last month, just from the traps that we have, that we know out there at the moment. One of the perks that Bill Garland has told me about Trap.nz, who he wasn't keen on using initially, was that only he knew where the bait stations were on his property, but now he's got this, the more located, GPS located, his workers now fill the bait stations for him, and he said it's a good way to keep track of his workers. And I asked him what he meant by that, and he said, well, I can find out what time they filled each bait station so I can see how fast they're working. So the perks of Trap.nz you never knew about. Next slide, please. We're working quite closely with Sanctuary Mountain Maunga-Tautari, and they're very excited about our project, obviously, because it very much benefits them. So this map here, obviously, is the Maunga in green, and this is a 3-kilometre buffer zone of properties, which represents just under 50 properties, or 39 landowners. The northern face, which is the area that we are protecting, that we want to protect, represents about a third of their predator-proof fence. And it's the northern face that gets the worst weather, it's most exposed, it gets the most incursions, and most possum sightings are seen in this area. So they're very excited if we can get more and more landowners on board. Although they have a relationship with the closest adjacent landowners, they don't go very far out. So that's where we can come in and work with getting that 3-kilometre buffer zone. Speaking with them, they've also even suggested that when staff are out there doing lots of predator-proof fence maintenance, which they do regularly, if the owners consented, they would be able to check the boundary traps as well. So we're constantly talking with them about how we can work together to make this a good solution for us all. I think that's probably me. Thanks, Paul.
My name is Paul Drage, and I have lived at 4/398 Luckatlass Road since 2012. Our land has a block of bush on it, which we share with our neighbours on the Pukekura Hill Range. Since 2013, with the help of a fund from the Regional Council, a small group of neighbours have been trapping mustards, rats and possums. The increase of native birds over this 9-year period has been significant. We now regularly see kaka, bellbird, falcon and the occasional robin. We have generally seen an increase in interest from the community, as we are all aware that we have the largest sanctuary in Aotearoa on our doorstep, and our streams and bush blocks on the hills offer sanctuary and corridors to the suburbs. It's hard to ignore a squawking kaka from overhead or an increasing dawn chorus. Local farmers talk positively about the initiative that the Regional Council took with removing the presence of possums within the area as part of TB control 15 years or so ago. We now have a very different situation, with possums being an issue throughout the area. My impression is that the community is generally open and positive being actively involved with predator control on their property, farmers are increasingly concerned about the increase in possums, and if funding for effective predator control can be secured, then I believe that there will be sufficient interest from landowners to want to be involved. Over time, I believe that with community involvement, we are likely to encourage farmers that have previously not had the time or funding to be involved. With the assistance of automated traps and funding to assist with contractors will go a long way for farmers to feel supported by this initiative. As a member of the steering committee, I'm keen to offer my support to the project and to help encourage the community to be involved.
Thank you. So we're going to open to questions now, and yeah. So I'll tell them when it's first. So who's first? You can sit at the table too, Joe. So the three of you are there, and just move the speaker around so the people online can hear your answers. Stu.
Yeah, kia ora. Stu Kneebones. Look, I just farm over the other side of the river at Whitehall. Are you familiar with the Whitehall Te Miro PPCA, Possum Control Project? Yeah. So, look, I really like what you're wanting to do here, but I've got some concerns based on the experiences we had in Whitehall. So we started off with exactly the same sort of ambition. We had all of the farmers keen to do stuff. Probably the only difference, we didn't have manga tautari on our back doorstep, but self-help type scenario, no shortage of enthusiasm. But sort of 12 months down the track, we did a bit of a stock take, and we found that A, the RTCs had continued to climb, and B, we found the vast majority of all the bait and that farmers had purchased at cost that I and a couple of other guys had personally delivered to all the farms was sitting in the back of the shed and hadn't been used. Because while there was no shortage of enthusiasm, there was a big shortage of time commitment when push came to shove and they had their farm work to do. So hence we moved to the scheme where the council now manage it for us, and we self-rated ourselves for a while, and it's now included in the biosecurity rate generally, and it's working very well. My understanding is around the country, regional councils have successively moved away from those self-help schemes for the very same reasons. So I can see, I saw on that map you had with the bait stations or traps, whatever they were. I saw Garland's farm and I saw the Easton's property, where obviously steering group members that are very passionate are doing some good stuff. I'm really worried that you're going to have a whole lot of its enthusiasm doesn't turn into actions on the ground in the bigger part of the area. Through no fault of anyone's and certainly through no fault of enthusiasm. So I'm just concerned about how you're going to address that, because I just don't want to see us repeat the same mistakes again.
So before you go, so your question in all of that is?
Do you understand my question? I think.
I can respond to your statements.
Well, my question is, I can't see how you're going to get, based on the experience that we've had, that the regional council had, that a whole lot of other regional councils around the country have had, I can't see how you're going to get the buy-in from those farmers on the ground. They'll be enthusiastic, but history tells us that they can't deliver because they've got a whole bunch of other commitments. Hence, we moved to a contractor-based scheme.
So my first point before I hand over to Karen, who's working with those farmers, is that we are funding and supporting through multiple funding streams paid coordinators to work with farmers.
Which we did as well, and that didn't help. Yeah.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yep, thanks for your questions, Joe. So basically, I think, and I don't know a huge amount about the Whitehall project, but things that I think we have going for our projects that, like you said, we do have the maunga, we have 2 natural boundaries. We've got a low residual trap RTC already. It's only 7.8%, whereas I think yours was a lot higher when you started.
Yep. So is that over the whole of that area?
It's over the whole of the area. So we did monitoring in May 2020.
Right.
So it's quite low, and we were surprised at how low it was. So we have a low rate already. We will be doing monitoring after years 1 and 3 to keep on track to see if we are going down at the rate we're happy with. The area was a former TB operation, and the benefit of years of control, which is why the RTC was so low. There's been a big mindset change, I think, since Predatory 2050, in that more people want to be involved. Like I said already, that there is a whole lot of people doing lots of restoration work already off their own bat. I go out to drop off traps and it's like, do you want to come and see the wetlands that we're restoring? So there's already people doing that and they're aware. And they're not even seeing the birds on their property yet because they're not close enough, but they're still doing that work. There's only 160 landowners, which I don't think is a huge amount. It's 200 properties, but it's 160 landowners. There is rural communities are amazing in that they already have strong connections between them. I'm getting into that group now. My kids go to school with their kids. They already know me a little bit. I'm getting neighbours that get traps off me, then their neighbours say, oh, actually, they're approaching me and saying, oh, you help my neighbour Phil next door, can I have some traps too? So there's a lot of people coming on board, and it's just word of mouth. We've got the steering group, of which we've got some keen restoration people like Paul here, Bill Garland, Takaputo Estate, so Marianne Eason. So a huge lot of people that are well known in the community already, and they know, I say, Sam had Paul's name, how to do Trap NZ, talk to your mate Paul, he knows how to do it, they can help there. So we've got lots of support there. We have budgeted for contractors in years 2 and 3. So the first year we really want to see, it's the keen people approaching me, and they're the ones that I'm working on at the moment because I'm kept busy enough with that. But we do have funding that we'd like to apply for that for future years. Automatic traps, absolutely, farmers are all about them, especially some of the bigger properties. And that's something that we've listened to right from the start when we first started talking in 2020. A lot of people are choosing to live here for the reason that it's so close to Sanctuary Mountain. There's a lot more lifestylers coming in, and they're choosing this life. They're choosing to live here because they want to have birds spitting out into their backyards. And so they already know that this is what they want to do. I sometimes think being part of Go Eco, it's independent from council, and without sort of dropping anybody out, not everybody is a big fan of council. We're independent, so they feel like they can come to us and have a chat about, well, this used to happen, but it doesn't now. What can you do for us? So we are listening, and we're aware of what's happened, and you know that perhaps some farmers might not want to deal with council, but they might want to deal with us because we're not council. I hate to say that in the council room. We have done the legwork, and we've spoken to landowners, involved them from early on, so we do know their concerns, and time. And to check traps is a big concern. A lot of them do have bait stations, and that's fine if they want to carry on that. A lot of people aren't getting into it because they have bigger properties and they can't afford the traps. So helping them with traps is a huge thing for them. There's one dairy farm, and they've done heaps of restoration work, planting up wetlands and everything. They haven't done any predator control because they've focused all their money into planting and fencing. So this is the next stage for them, and they're simply stoked that Bush to Burbs is there to help them with the traps because they don't have any knowledge and they don't have the funds for it. The birds and bats are visiting anyway, and people, the last thing people want to see is the birds and bats arriving and you know, and dying as soon as they reach the, you know, jump over. So people don't want to see that. They're excited that robin are following around them in the garden, particularly, you know, the closer ones. They're excited by that, and the more they see the birds jumping over the fence, the more they want to do. So I think the mindset has really changed, and I think that's key. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Kapaitela?
Yeah, look, I'm not convinced, and I guess I'm just wondering, should it be a little bit more focused in terms of certain areas, or should we get some sort of buy-in from the landowners before we go the whole hog? Because you can kind of see where the buy-in is there now off that trap rather than, but anyway, look, I'll see what other people have to say, and we've got a bit of
Please,
thinking
may
to do.
I just interject one thing? That I've noticed in the last 18 months, the 80-220 as a game changer for farmers, because they don't need to do anything with it once it's set up.
Yeah.
It's very effective at controlling possums, and we've seen a number of farmers really get on board because of that. The issue is funding.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Kathy?
Yeah, thank you. Look, I really like the work that you do. You've done a huge range of work within the community, and I see a huge amount of enthusiasm and commitment from the people within your group. So I just want to thank you for what you've done in the past as well as what you're proposing now. So I see that the funding you're requesting is just for traps. I can't see anything there that you don't seem to be looking for money for bait. At least that's what and I just wanted to ask you about that. So does that mean that you are wanting to encourage people to trap rather than use toxins? So that was one question. My other question was just around, are you also addressing the animal welfare issues around trapping, making sure that people are checking the traps? You know, you're talking about automatic self-setting traps, which is great. But if you are also using other traps, are you making sure that they're checking them every 24 hours? Those are probably my main questions, but I might have one more. I'll just see how you respond to those.
The live capture traps. So we're promoting humane kill traps. So they're traps that are the NAWAC traps, approved traps. So they are kill traps, so not live capture. There certainly will be live capture traps out there, but that's not the ones we're providing. So we're not. So we are promoting trapping as opposed to using toxins. Obviously, we're not dismissive of toxins, and there is a place in absolutely with larger properties. But this project is a trapping one. We want to get more people on board, and there's a lot of people that don't want to use toxins. They've had problems in the past with secondary poisoning and such. So there's, like I said, there's lifestyle blocks out there. There's a whole lot of people with pet animals that are concerned. We can get more people on board if we're promoting trapping than toxin use.
Okay, thanks. I don't need to ask any more. Thank you.
Does anybody want a question? Free. I can see.
Yeah, look, I totally think what you're doing is absolutely amazing. And when it comes generally for dollars spent, the money that we take from you in rates and then give you a little bit back, we really do get value for money. And I totally appreciate what you're doing in your area personally, and wish you all the well with that project. Thank you.
Well, kia ora koutou. That's your presentation done. That's all the questions asked. I wanted to be asked. There's none online, so thank you. We do go into the next stage, and you will be let know the outcome of today in at least the next 7 days, a week. Okay? So thank you.
Kia ora koutou, thank you.
If the next one is ready, Judy, can you bring them in, please? That's okay. Okay. If they're there, bring them in. If not, I'll just have them off as they go. It's not. Anybody just do anything around Facebook? No, we've got a Facebook what's her name? 20 to 25th. But nobody's trying to get rid of it.
Kia ora. I am jumping the queue, giving you some time back. That's right. Well, I thought.
We've just got a councillor who's out of the room at the moment.
Ah, yes.
I'll just give you a general idea of where we're going today. When we start, of course, you have 3 minutes for your presentation and 20 minutes for questions and you sort of ask the room. But at the end of that, this council will have a break after the last person after you, and then we'll come back and we'll deliberate. And then you should have an answer within at least 7 working days.
Wow, fantastic.
You know what I said? You should. You should have them. So,
fantastic.
welcome to the table. I'm just going to quickly introduce you to who's around the table and our councillors online. You might even know 1 or 2 of them. So,
indeed.
Top there, you've got Kathy White from Waikato, Newburn from Waikato Country, Fred Litchlight from Waikato Region, Dennis Ted from Ames Coromandel. Online, we've got Barry Quayle, our chair, who is Hamilton, Angela Strange, who is Hamilton, Pamela Story, who's Waikato Hungary, and I believe we've got a photo on there as well, who's Ruko, who's from Waikato. And I'm Katarana Hodge. I am one of the Māori councillors on here from the Waikato. On this side of me, you've got Greg Ryan, who's our ICM director, and on this side, we've got my secretary, the man who's running the show. So that's who we have. So the table's all yours. It's what, 2:15? Yep, 2:15.
Yep.
All yours.
Well, kia ora. Thank you very much. So, kia ora tēnā koutou katoa no mā haere mai, ko tēnā husini whakaingoa, ko kamapua o Waikato Forest Sanctuary. So look, just thanks for the opportunity to be here. First, I'd just quickly like to apologise because we had intended to have a number of the committee members here today to support this presentation. Unfortunately, the chair, Jude, got called to Auckland, and Sarah, who is probably an interesting mind of information on the topics we're going to touch on today, is currently advising into Project Kiwi up the top of the peninsula. So they've both been called away, which has left me with the enjoyment of presenting to you today. I guess just to use the 10 minutes really punctually and quickly, I fully presume that you've all kind of had the opportunity to digest the information that was submitted. What I thought I might just quickly do is just quickly retouch on who we are, where we've come from, what we're doing, and in particular what this particular application is about. Why would we be applying for this? I should note we have been the recipients, beneficiaries of Natural Heritage Fund previously, which we applied for in 2017, 5 years ago, and was for just over 3 years. I could imagine there may be questions. You might want to know what some of the outcomes came out of that are. This program of work is now a kind of an evolution, a next step of being able to leverage the benefit of that. So if you're comfortable, let me just quickly sprint through the presentation. Okay, next slide. Yep, let's jump into them. And interesting. There's been a little bit of a reshuffle going on in the process. Never mind. Look, the presentation I have here is not really to add more information to what's already been submitted. It's more to inspire you as to what Waikato Forest is all about. It is different from many of the other programs of work, and I guess that's the point I want to try and get across. So just very briefly, the Waikato Forest Incorporated Society was set up over 20 years ago, in 2001. Its founding members, 18 neighbouring property owners we all brought together. And since that time, we've built the program to be running over 620 hectares of biodiversity protection. I'll quickly mention in passing the previous fund was to help us actually set up the crucial infrastructure to do that, which we successfully achieved. And in fact, we achieved the success measures, the KPIs for that during that program of work. So we're a community-led conservation group. We also work on adjacent dockland, although that's not part of the submission for this funding round. That's a separate piece of work that we do to one side. A couple of things that are quite unique to what we do is from our outset 23 years ago, we've had a kind of a whole of ecosystem approach and a whole of biodiversity approach to the work we've been doing. So we're not singularly, for example, and not picking on anybody in particular, but we're not singularly, for example, a Kiwi conservation group. We're not singularly looking at avian species only. And what we've found over the 20 years is we've actually found a whole run of very endangered species, which has now brought our focus into that particular area. Now, our submission was titled A Trilogy of Tonga, and that's because we have 3 particular endangered species, all of them actually up on that slide there, which we are becoming increasingly anxious about our obligation and responsibility to protect them. And what we really need this funding for is to help us understand, community-led program, to help us understand in the field the biodiversity requirements that we need to allow these populations to sustain themselves. Why these 3? And I'll jump ahead. I actually had this a little later in my presentation, but why these 3? That's great. They are all endemic to the Waikato. They are all highly vulnerable and highly endangered. And one of them in particular is predicted to be the next butterfly extinction potentially in the world. So we take that up. We have discovered these species here almost by accident, and we've been focused on that very, very much over the last 5 to 10 years. We now have abundant populations of them, but we need to undertake the research to understand whether we're actually having any fundamental effect to the critical ecosystem that's there. So quickly moving on, Waikato Forest, as many of you will know, you can see on the map on the right-hand side of that slide, we're kind of sitting almost smack in the middle of the peninsula. We also sit smack in the middle of extensive state and native forest. And we are identified as an area of significant natural values. And we sit up high, so we're actually portions of the forest are higher than Castle Rock, which I'm sure many of you will be familiar with as a landmark. So we have a number of the key peaks of the Coromandel Ranges as part of this forest. We're surrounded 70% by DOC managed land, which gives us a benefit. And the other benefit we've got, which is a crazy benefit that was received by the fact that when the land back almost 30 years ago was subdivided, a private road was put in. And that road gives us access deep into the forest, which otherwise we wouldn't have. So that's pretty much about who we are and the actual location. This project now, after 20 plus years of fundamentally focusing extensively on protection, we now recognise the need to shift some of our focus, maintain the protection, but shift our focus towards restoration. And whilst this is specifically about those three species. Those three species sit in an ecosystem which fundamentally supports many, many, many other species as well. So we're using those three species as our key drive. As I mentioned, they're all endemic to the Waikato. They're all highly vulnerable. We do have established populations, and a really good example is the striped gecko, where 80% of all sightings ever in the world have happened at Mahakiro Forest. And the Helms butterfly I'll mention in a few moments. So our solution to this, and maybe you can move on to the next slide, please, is what you helped us do. You were foundational, you being the Regional Council, were foundational for us to set up an infrastructure, which you can see on the map on the right-hand side there. Every one of those dots is some form of trap or bait station or what have you. And to put that in perspective, that would probably be the most intense predator control programs probably on the peninsula, potentially in the region and maybe in the country. But the reason is because of these tiny species that we're trying to protect. These species have very, very small home ranges. So as a consequence, it's really essential for us to be like that. Now, since the funding round was completed for the last Natural Heritage Fund, which was completed about 2 years ago, we've continued to sustain the program ourselves across maintaining all of those stations and all of those traps at a very intense level. What we're wanting to shift to now, which is the 3 bullet points there, the academic research, biodiversity education, and the community engagement around these specific species, because we believe that there is an opportunity that is found by the fact that we don't think that these species only exist here. But at the moment, we have so little information about them that we simply don't know. So we're saying use this site as a site for us to gather that information, share that information with other community conservation groups in particular, and we suspect we will actually start to see these species being protected elsewhere by some simple techniques and so on. So that's our fundamental program. Perhaps next slide, please. So I thought I would just quickly share with you what the 3 species are, just very briefly. Helms butterfly, one's very widely abundant across New Zealand. Recently, about 4 or 5 years ago, we had a global specialist who studied these butterflies, never seen them in the wild, came to New Zealand, studied, went around New Zealand for over 3 months looking for this butterfly, and only found 5, and only found them at Mahakiro. Since then, we have now tracked down where we actually are finding eggs, we're finding caterpillars, we're finding all the stages of their life cycle. Next slide, please. So I just wanted you to, this is the heartstring bit, which is I wanted you to know what these things are. So northern striped gecko, you're probably aware of, only first sighted in 1997. Fundamentally, only about half a dozen sightings in the following 10 years. We now have hundreds of individuals recorded in our database at Mahakiro. Now, we're not suggesting that Mahakiro is the only place where these are, but at the moment, the fact that 80% of them are being sighted here, we're turning around and going, that puts a real obligation, we feel a real burden of obligation to make sure that they survive here until we can be sure of the others. And the third one, I'm sure you'll all be familiar with. Next slide, please. Is the Archie's frog. The most, as it states there, the most ecologically distinct and globally endangered amphibian in the world. New Zealand has 4 remaining native frogs. It originally had 7. We've got 4 left. This is by far the most crucial, with huge cultural significance for Māori, and in particular Māori of the region. This only really survives in the kind of mist forests, and we have got probably the largest recorded hotspot, certainly the only place where they're currently studied. So what I quickly wanted to do was the solution for us was threefold. We can maintain ourselves the general pest control program that we've got running, but we need to keep it highly intensified, and that's what we're struggling with, and a small portion of the funding we would like to go towards allowing us to continue that intensified effort in particular atolls where these exist. The second thing would then be to undertake a site-specific in-the-field study. We have a number of academic partners already. We've got about 5 or 6 academic organisations, institutions that participate with us on a regular basis. I'm talking every quarter. We have somebody down there studying one of these species, actually gathering that information, not to try and be an endangered species recovery plan that DOC might do, but to try and be an in-the-field program of work that we can advise other groups so that they know what they're looking for and that we can actually start to protect them more broadly than just on this site. And thirdly then was to actually take that and educate that across the region and run a small, succinct little education program over the next 3 years. So that's fundamentally our program. We believe it's got really good alignment to the fund. You know, it's protecting and restoring. It's multi-generational. It's very high ecological value of the area. It's community-led and it's community benefit. So we kind of look at that internally. We think it ticks many of those boxes that the fund was set up for. And we think it also ticks many of the boxes for WRC from a strategic priority point of view as well, especially water. And I should mention that this forest is the headwater for 7 first-order streams. It has catchments that go both into the Whitianga side, but also the Manaia Coromandel side. So it has catchments going both ways. So we believe that it actually adds value in there, but the key focus of it is about trying to work out the biodiversity requirements and in particular reverse biodiversity loss for these species. So I'll stop there. I've overrun my 10 minutes. I know I must have.
Enthusiasm is a good.
Yes, I'll stop and.
Sure.
Yeah.
So the floor is Stu.
Thanks. Look, really like the work you guys do, and I was on the council when we approved your last one. My question is around public benefit in terms of access, and I'm not in any way suggesting you have open access, because I know you've got some somewhat questionable neighbours not down the road from you.
Indeed. Always challenges.
Just want to understand, I see educational opportunities. Are you guys open to school groups and things like that coming through for biodiversity studies and things like that? So I guess where I'm coming from is we're putting public money in here, you're doing some great stuff, like the concept of the public being able to enjoy that in a positive way, not a negative way. Like that's negative for you guys either. Yeah.
Well, a great question, and I think I can answer it pretty succinctly, because we've always, our vision for Waikato Forest 20-something years ago was about it being a wellspring of endemic biodiversity. What we started to realise in the last 10 years is by wellspring, it doesn't just mean that the species are healthy and that the environment's healthy, but about the fact that we can actually be a wellspring with regards to the knowledge and that we're sharing. So what is not contained in this submission, particularly because I felt that it was actually a distraction, a year before lockdown, 3 years before lockdown, we started on a program to build an education centre in the forest, specifically for the purpose that you stated. We actually completed that. We started fundraising that a year before lockdown, and we completed it about 6 months into lockdown, surprisingly enough. And that's a facility that's there with the sole intent of it being available to academic partners to come and research from, school kids and so on to be able to come up and actually share in the biodiversity we have. And it's located, if you like, kind of in the middle of the conservation area, so that therefore you can literally kind of step out the door and be in the area of Now, our reason for doing that, and it took some effort, as you can imagine, trying to fundraise for that, the local business community were extraordinarily supportive, but was simply to answer into the question that you're putting to, so therefore give a tangible place where people can come, that we can run programs. And part of our little education portion of this fund would be to help us sustain that program of work, right? Of course, COVID's come flying on in like it has for most of us and kind of upset the program of work that we were wanting to run there. So we have had it to date. We've had about probably half a dozen gatherings of 30 people or more. It still remains a centre for conservation knowledge sharing. And through, for example, predator-free Haraki Coromandel, we actually run a number of events there to support programs like that, and Moiho and others, you know. So look, the answer is yes. It is private land, so we do need to be cognizant of the fact that we can't open it like a national park.
Absolutely,
Partly because we all have liability. So we need to manage that very, very carefully.
And I'd like to answer. Thank you. Cool.
Thank you. Dennis.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the work you do. I think you're probably world famous, at least in the Coromandel.
Thank you, Dennis.
And probably wider. I was interested in just to drill down to one of the species, the butterfly. I think you mentioned that someone went in for 3 months and found 5, but you'd found some other indications of life. Can you give us, is it possible to give us some indication of just how many you think are out there? Just how endangered, how close to extinction?
Well, I'd be very brave to do that, I have to say. The thing that surprised us with the Helms butterfly, or the forest ringlet as it's called, was that it used to be so prolific. It used to be north of Auckland, extensive through the Waikato, into the Taranaki, even in the north of the South Island, believe it or not. And the expert that I'm talking about is a gentleman by the name of Steve Wheatley, who works for David Attenborough's Global Butterfly Trust. He's been studying this butterfly, so I'll do a little anecdotal story quickly, but he'd been studying this butterfly for about 20 years, never seen it actually in the wild, because it only exists here. So he came up specifically to find it. We knew we'd sighted some up on Waikato, but at that point we didn't think that there was anything particularly unique about Waikato, until he spent the 3 months around all the areas where it had been reported previously. And it was literally in his last 2 days that he came up to our place and found 5. And that made us really sit up and sort of start to understand. Now, there are 2 main reasons for the demise of the butterfly. Habitat loss is a substantial one, and predation is another one. So just very briefly, in answer to your question, we now know that we have breeding. We are supporting a breeding cycle up there. We've found the eggs, we've found the chrysalis, we've done all those things. Do we know whether it goes further afield, down towards the coast or further along the peninsula? We don't know. Do we know that they exist in Porongi or somewhere else? We don't know. And the main reason is because there's very little information about them, actually. So at the moment, what we do know is, I think in the last, we surveyed for them at a particular time of year. And at the last survey, we sighted over a dozen of them, which is pretty extraordinary considering they're only this big. And the eggs are the size of a pinhead. So, and they laid 1 egg,
Really, just one?
Yeah, one. You find one. Now, so I guess for me, it'll be almost impossible for me to make any formal prediction as to whether there are still pockets of these all over the place or whether they're not. What we know is that this is the last place where they've been seen in the last 4 or 5 years. Maybe even one. And for us, that as a community, we feel an immense obligation to try and understand them better, so we can understand what the answer is. All we know is that the academics are telling us, and it is formally acknowledged, that this could be the next butterfly extinction in the world, and that could be on the list of extinctions as well. So, so we're just sitting there at this moment with not sufficient information to be able to answer a question like that, and that's exactly what the program is trying to achieve.
Cool,
so I'm
you.
sorry, not a particularly compelling answer.
Long way of saying
I'm
no.
happy with your answer.
Long way of saying no. Thank you very much. Yes, yeah.
Could Kathy,
Thank you. Yes, I know you've got a lot of committed people up there, and I thank you for the work you're doing there. My questions are specifically to do with the amphibians side of things. I know that someone by the name of Bruce Waldman did a lot of work on the Coromandel Peninsula. He was a herpetologist working for Canterbury University.
Correct.
Around the time of the fungus that was affecting
yes,
the fungus. Yes, I can never say that word. But I know that he was a little unpopular because he made some claims around there needing to be some studies around the effect of toxins on amphibians.
Yes.
And he ended up leaving New Zealand, went to Seoul, worked at Seoul University, and he's now running Integrative Sciences Department at Oklahoma State University.
I didn't know that.
But he contacted me to say that when he was in Seoul, he did a study on the impacts of 1080 on Asiatic toads.
Right.
And it's a study which is about to be published, but it had extremely high mortality. So I guess my question for you is around the toxins, because I mean, you're near to Doc, who uses 1080, landscape scale. But you're also using bait stations, and so I guess I want to know whether you've considered just using traps, and also whether you're conscious of the types of toxins that you are using. For instance, are you using Prodifocum, which is the one that has the highest risks in terms of secondary poisoning?
Of course.
And so if you're conscious of that, what have you done to minimise the risks? And were you conscious of this research, especially around you saying, frogs are an indicator species and they need a really healthy habitat, etc. Are you conscious of how dangerous some toxins can be for them?
Yes. So
before you answer, can you be precise about your answers?
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Certainly, of course I can. I'll try to do exactly that. Was I aware of that particular piece of research? No. Part of what we're wanting to do is actually pull in things like that. We have always been very, very cognizant about the use of toxins. We use toxins, and that's simply been after 20 years worth. We have realised that with the resources we have available, we simply can't achieve the outcomes we want without them. And a really good example would be, for example, we currently control 11 different species of predator. One of those would be part of the focus of this, which is wasps. And so you're probably aware of the Vespex toxin that's available. And without that, we do not think that we could protect the butterfly, for example. So, and you can understand why. With regards to 1080, we have utilised 1080 within the forest, Waikato forest, in the past. We have continually reduced back our toxins, so we do substantially trap, especially during the winter months, we substantially trap. The last time I undertook a study of, and I'll try and wrap up on this point, but the last time I undertook a study to try and achieve the same outcomes we had with toxins, with trapping, it was going to take, we assessed that it was going to take us about 8 times as much labour effort to be able to do so. And that was on the presumption that there would be some species, like I mentioned, wasps, where you simply would be unable to capture them, right? So you'd have to continue using toxins for those. And I guess being a realist, we've sat there going, we need to be able to protect this environment the best way we can. We simply don't have the resources to be able to put in 8 times as much physical effort. And that's the conundrum that we all face. Just quickly summing up, and I won't give an anecdote around this, but we have always been immensely cognizant of the toxins that we're using. And with regards to things like brodifacoon, no, we don't utilise brodifacoon as a direct toxin anymore. It is part of double tap, and we do use that selectively at very specific moments in the annual cycle. So one of our focuses has been very much to get the best return for the investment we have to put in to try, and the best return is the protection of species for us. It's not about killing things. If we could kill less things and achieve the same outcome, that would be our intent. But at the moment with these particular species, we simply don't know what level of protection is necessary to allow them to flourish. They seem to be flourishing now, so that suggests we've got to a point. But I hope in some ways that's answered the question. Yes, we're challenged by toxins, the use of toxins as well, and we take it very seriously.
I just had, you can give me a one sentence for this one. When you said intensified predator control, what did you mean? Because you've got baseline and then you've got intensified.
Yeah, so our baseline would be, for example, to hold possum numbers extremely low, to hold, to continue stoke programs, to keep rat numbers across the whole estate probably below about 10%. Our intensified control, we currently believe that we need rat numbers to be below 2% to give suitable protection for these species. So we're looking at a lot of the other programs which are looking at, this arbitrary 5% rat number to allow relocation of species. And we're suddenly going, we don't think it's coming close enough. So the intensified work is in particular pockets. So you'll notice that the overall program is about 600 hectares. We're talking about an intensified program of about 400 hectares. So hopefully that helps. I'm sorry, I've taken up time. I apologize. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so that's us for the day, and I was lucky enough to explain to you the next steps. So thank you, Tim, and after this we have one more, then deliberations, and like I said, our team will come back to you within at least the next 7 working days.
Well, good luck with the deliberations, and again, apologies if the rest of the team couldn't be here. But
you did a good job on your own, so
thank you very, very much for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Vince.
Last person, last group. Who are these teams? Chris Key. Well done, guys. Doing well. Wow. They're fighting someone. That's right. Teams Coast Kiwi Key Incorporated. Who's that over there? Oh, what's his name? What's his name? Yeah, back. Ka pai tēnā, ka rere koutou, kia ora. So I'm going to quickly introduce us to yourselves. I don't know if you know the rules or not, but once I've asked you to start speaking, you've got 10 minutes for presentation. Got a half an hour up, but we need 20 minutes for questions. And somehow or other, the answers are like a story. So I will be keeping you tabs. You're the last one for us for today before we go away and do some more work around this. So welcome to the table. You have Kathy White from Taupo, Stu Newbone from Waipa King Country, Fred Litchmark from Waikato Regional, Dennis Teague from Coromandel 10 online. You've got Barry Quayle from Hamilton, Angela Strange, Hamilton, Pamela Story from Waikato Huntley. You saw that? And our koro is just leaving, Hugh Verco from Matamata Piako, and you've got myself, I'm Katarana Hodge. I'm the one of the two Māori constituents councillors, and on this side of me, you've got Greg Ryan, who's our director for ICM, and you've got over here our #1 secretary today, and who's been a damn big help. And at the back, of course, you've got different staff around who all belongs to Greg's team, except for Sarah at the back, who is Democracy Services. So, welcome to the table. Once I let you go, like I said, 10 minutes for your presentation. I have been nice up today and let people go over. For some unknown reason, people don't know how to tell the time. But what that does, it cuts down our questioning time from our councillors around the room. So I think for us to get a real good understanding of how your team works, your 10 minutes is important so people can ask the questions. Kapai? So I guess you're the lady in the middle on the side of those two thorns, and you're going to be the lead, huh? All yourself. Go for it.
Thank you very much. Tēnā koutou katoa, and thank you for the opportunity to present to Council today. So on my left, we've got Finn Buchanan, who is the technical leader and actually the founder of Thames Coast Kiwi Care. And on my right, we've got Rick Balfour, who is a committee member and also a previous coordinator.
You are?
And I'm Moira Coatsworth, and I'm lucky enough to be the chair of this group.
All yours.
Thank you.
Go for it.
Thank you. So our purpose is protecting both kiwi and the habitat. And our project started in 2006 when the Peninsula Project were already doing the browser control. So we stepped in to do mustelid trapping. But since 2010, when the Peninsula Project ceased, all the private land has only had our mustelid trapping. And that's why Carolyn King's comments about single trapping are really what underlies our coming to you today. We've only got single method trapping on the private land. So what we are asking is we're wanting to continue with our current mustelid trapping for kiwi protection, and that's by way of contributing to a coordinator, but we're wanting a significant increase to add possum and rat control back in for habitat restoration. And the ask around that is we need a new project leader, we need to add AT220 traps to our existing trap lines, we want to reopen tracks and reinstall bait stations, and we want to undertake the bait operation in the years that DOC does their aerial drop to complement that. So that's what we're here to ask you about today. Firstly, I want to acknowledge Ngāti Tamatera, who are mana whenua. We only have one iwi as mana whenua in our project area, and we've been really blessed to have their support right throughout the project. This picture shows last year we were returning a juvenile kiwi that had been raised on a predator-free island. So this is a large turnout of Ngāti Tamatera to take the bird back into the forest. I'm just briefly going to give you three highlights really of our record, just to give you some background information. So probably the first standout aspect of our project is our current trapping. So we've got a 16-year record of best practice mustelid trapping. We've got more than 800 traps across over 5,000 hectares. We started with 2,000 hectares 16 years ago, and we've steadily increased to over 5,000 hectares. We've got 60 trappers who trap 115 kilometres of trap line 16 times a year. So, you know, that's a really solid record of trapping. And the reason for that trapping is our kiwi recovery. And I was told by the dock scientist that there's nowhere our record is as good as it gets in kiwi recovery. So nationwide there's a 2% decline, and we've had a 10-fold increase. We started when the population was just on the verge of collapse. There were only 28 kiwi estimated to be left, and now we've got, last year the estimate was 250 in our project area, and we've got another 50 that are being juveniles still on predator-free islands that are being raised. So that's 300 kiwi from an initial population of 28. So our trapping, I think that's the proof of our trapping program. As part of that, we do Operation Nest Egg, and we've got 95 kiwi that we have successfully, we've got 6 transmitted kiwi, and we take the eggs from them. They go to Auckland Zoo and then they're raised on islands. So I've just got a wee clip. We were featured, some of you may have seen the Fight for the Wild documentaries on TV1, and we're in the last episode called Hope, and it's just a short extract so you can see the country and you can see the our kiwi handler and Nat from Auckland Zoo retrieving a kiwi egg. Oh, there's no sound.
Do you in share screen as a tick box shared computer?
It doesn't actually matter. Oh, here we are.
It was there.
If you can't manage the sound, it doesn't matter, Judy. We can just, you'll see that you can, it was to give you a sense of it. So he's talking about kiwi being essential to biodiversity, being essential to people's well-being, but it cuts now into our project area. He's finished. No, this is just the end of, because it's a voice cut-off. So this is our Tamata forestry area here. So that's driving up the Tamata, and this is our kiwi handler who goes up and down Dale trying to locate these birds who move around a lot. So they're looking to pick up the signals from the transmitter. They know he's sitting on the eggs and they're looking for the burrow. And they've located the burrow, and there she is going in to collect the egg. So I guess what I'm saying is we've got best practice trapping, a long record. We've got a stellar result with kiwi recovery. But it's really down to our community. I think we realised at the National Kiwi Hui we're quite unusual in the extent of community participation. I mean, these are small communities on the west coast of the Coromandel, but we've always been community-led. We've had really strong landowner support right throughout, as well as from Ngāti Tamatera. All those 60 trappers that go out every fortnight in summer and monthly in winter are volunteers. So it's most groups, they've got contract trappers, 1 or 2 who go in. We're managing an army of 60 volunteers, making sure they can do best practice trapping safely. And so we actually clock up in this little small community over 4,000 community hours this last year. That's an average of 11 hours for every day of the year. And our support's continually growing till we've got over 500 supporters now. The guy on the right in the photo usually wears a suit and is a specialist engineer in Auckland. And we picked that photo because I think it shows you how much people enjoy being part of the project. He was part of a firm that came down, the whole crew came down on a Saturday and did a track clearance for us. So yeah, that's really the third component of our strong base for this project, is the extent of community participation. So I'd like to go on now and just talk to you about what we're asking for. So the first component is to continue some funding of our coordinator. There you see her auditing traps, doing environmental education, doing some awareness raising in the street parade. So she's got a really varied role, and it's absolutely full to capacity. And it's the real linchpin. I mean, you can't have 60 trappers engaged safely and effectively without really good support, and that's what this coordinator role provides. So we can't ask her to do more, and this is a significant step up, this new project. So we really need, while we're in the establishment phase, we need a project leader for the habitat restoration. And she or he will be involved in consulting with landowners, gaining the approvals and doing ongoing liaison well there. This person needs to lead the trap installation and all the ongoing servicing. And so we'll be using volunteers to get the AT220s onto our trap lines. So we need somebody managing that. The third role is to design and implement the possum and rat baiting regime that supports the dock operations. So they need to do a pretty solid job there. And fourthly, we put in for contract track cutters to actually reopen the tracks that were previously used, and this person will need to supervise that. So that's the second component of our ask to you. You will have seen the map. So this is our project area. It's 5,000 hectares. The shaded area is the buffer zone that we're wanting to firstly get our AT220s in our bait operation in. So everything to the right of that is the dock estate. They're really excited by the proposal, and they want to also contribute by, they've got a strip where they don't do their aerial operation. They want to do the baiting there as well. And our largest private landowner, Tamata Forestry, which is 400 hectares, we're negotiating with them at the moment about what contribution they will make. So that's our map. The actual traps that we've chosen are the AT220s because they are a pest control method that can be managed by our volunteers. So they're self-resetting, they're auto-luring kill traps, and they will go on our existing trap lines. So the big advantage is once they've been set up and any kinks ironed out, they will be able to transfer back and be maintained by our current trappers. We just, since this presentation was done, Bay Bush has released to us, they're putting out a report next week, which is a one-year trial of the AT220s up north. So if you're interested in effectiveness, ask Finn. We've brought along that data. They've released the data to us for this purpose today before their report comes out. So that's the possum and rat trap. So I guess you don't need me to tell you what's important about habitat restoration. So that's the big advantage of re-establishing habitat restoration. But for our taonga species kiwi, rats and possums, although they're not they're not a target species, the rats compete for food. And I've just put a clip up here. It's also from the Fight for the Wild documentary. It was taken down in Stewart Island, but it gives you a sense of the kind of interaction that takes place between possums and our kiwi. Oh, you won't have sound on this one either, will you? Okay.
Have you got much more after
No,
this?
that's the last slide. So,
Okay.
so
what's in there?
I can just talk to that. So unfortunately, if anyone's interested, if you Google Fight for the Wild, the 4 episodes are up. But what this is showing, it is showing it now. It shows the possum continually harassing the kiwi in the burrow. So the kiwi's sitting on an egg, and this possum would come in maybe every hour all night to try and get to that egg. So yeah, the possums are having a big impact. So look, I think I've kept to the 10 minutes.
Well done, Maura.
It's a bit of a race, but we are really happy to answer your questions. Ngā mihi nui, and thank you again for the opportunity to present to you in person today. I'll hand over to Finn to answer any questions that you've got about the technical.
So Kathy, we have to 3:15, Kathy, so your questions would need to be pretty precise, okay?
Yeah, no trouble. So look, I think it's great what you're proposing, especially in terms of extending the trapping network. I guess my question is just around the bait that you're using in the bait stations. Are you trying to use non-residual toxins? You are, and if so, what are you using? And yeah, that'd be great.
To a degree, we'll be guided by your own technical experts on what toxin is most appropriate. Right at the outset, we talked about the fact that if you use one method of pest control, evolution works against you. So we will be endeavouring to find the right toxin that landowners are comfortable with that will give us that secondary knockdown of mustelids that the DOC's aerial operation is achieving as well. So, yeah, because we're looking at this in sort of could be 3 to 4 years out, we're hoping that there will be a bit more clarity on what toxin would be appropriate for us to use as a community group.
I guess I'm just conscious of the fact that the Thames Coromandel District Council advocates for hunting, trapping and use of non-residual toxins. And I know Ngāti Tamatera, because we've also visited them, have also said they're keen on non-residual toxins. So, you know, use of something like Paratox would be great because then there isn't any secondary poisoning, but, you know, just wanted to know whether you were going to be using anything like Prodipicum or, you know, if you're going to be using something like Prodipicum, second generation anticoagulant.
Because we're working alongside public conservation land, we wouldn't be allowed to use it.
No.
But yeah, we're open to what I guess your technical people and the DOC's technical people will be advising us as our best option. And also it'll come down to what individual landowners within the project area are comfortable with.
So on the private land, Prodipicum might be used there, but just not along the DOC boundary. I know DOC don't like Prodipicum.
I guess ultimately, if a landowner said that's what we want to use, yeah, we need to listen to that.
Dennis.
Thanks. I think you mentioned these AT220 traps, and you maybe have some data. Could you maybe just briefly share that with us?
Yeah, I think we sent you some slides.
I think they came too late, so she put
them. Okay, Bay Bush Action, which are a community group who apply here, that area there, they have run a trial with the AT220 manufacturers. They did 550 hectares. I think they put in 550 of these AT220s, and they've monitored what the pest populations have done over a 12-month period. They've achieved 0% rat tracking from, I think, without the slides, it's a bit of a shame. 0% rat tracking for at least the last 2 months.
Yeah. I mean, the trend's just bad.
And possums were down well below the 3% chew card monitoring tool. Yeah, and we've been really lucky. Maura's been communicating with the AT220 manufacturers. They're going to throw their technical support behind us. So we're pretty confident that the tool's a good one.
Thank you.
Sue?
Well, not a question, just say keep up the good work. Really, really appreciate what you guys are doing. So thank you.
Anybody on that? No?
Can I just make one more comment? Something I didn't say was when the Peninsula project was operating, Finn was actually the manager of the Peninsula project. So going back to re-establish those tracks and reopen those lines and communicate with the landowners, we're kind of ahead of phase one really, in that we've got Finn on board to help with this.
Good one. So I have a couple, which is because I don't know anything about anything. So is there stress with the mother kiwi when you take the eggs away?
Well, it's the male kiwi that sits on it, but
that's okay then. No, I'm just. No, I didn't mean that. So is there any stress? Probably
we're
not.
not planning to do it forever. We did it because some of those things are unknown, but they haven't found that. I mean, it's considered best practice, but we're actually finishing it this year. We wanted to get an initial boost, but we're going, back to using our trapping as the main thing. But the other thing is that the young chicks don't hang around with the parents in the way that most bird populations do. They just leave them. So, so do you want to add anything?
Yeah, well, that's what makes kiwi chicks and kiwis so vulnerable to mustelids, is that they're young when they hatch, are basically out on their own. They've got they carry an egg, a yolk sac for a while that gives them nourishment until they can get mobile enough to start feeding. But they're just dumb, wide-eyed little guys who are completely vulnerable, not able to protect themselves.
Well, that cancels out all other stuff I wanted to ask if they are vulnerable. Well, there's no more questions. Kathy, you got something quick? You have
ask one more question, and it was just when you said about Ngāti Tamatera, can you just explain who you're talking about? And my only reason for this is I've got written here, Ngāti Tamatera, Te Māti Waru Hapu, use trapping, hunting and cyanide only, and their method is proven to work. They use the VM trapping maintenance regime. And I know they feel quite strong, that hapu feels quite strongly about that.
So we're on our second generation of kaumātua from Ngāti Tamatera. When we started, we were privileged to have Ricky Rakana and Shuta Kikino as our original kaumātua. They've passed on, and we've got a group now that are Dr. Koro Ngato,
Arama Chase,
and
Skipper.
The three of them
are young.
Been behind us in sport.
So even with the use of Brodifficum?
No, we're not going near Brodifficum at the moment.
Okay.
All I said is that if we end up with a landowner that insists on it, we need to listen to that. And so we're talking about private land.
So that's based on the Peninsula project work that you did, that there wasn't sort of one system that was put in for everyone, that you talk to private landowners. So you're saying you can't guarantee that you wouldn't use it, but it's not that you're coming advocating.
That's right, exactly.
Does that make it clear to you?
It does. It's just I'm conscious of the fact that people have said to me a lot that they don't want to use anything that's a residual toxin, and so I'm just trying to bear that in mind when I listen.
And those use whatever they want.
Yeah, again, with the toxins, are you requesting money from us to pay for the toxins? You are.
The bait operation is 25.
No, I just wanted to know, because whether it's public money used for toxins, there is a voice. The other thing was, you are working on the west side of the peninsula, is that correct? Oh, that's why it's the best side then. Of course. Thank you.
Okay, well, that's us, and thank you for coming in. No doubt our team will get back to you in at least around about 7 working days, maybe. I might be stretching that too thin. It might be hard. I'm not sure. But they'll come back to you as soon as they can. We will continue meeting after this to go over everything we heard and give our team some idea of our thoughts going forward. Yep. So thank you for travelling. Hope you have a good trip back and safe travel. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Are they good to eat? Did we eat a lot? We ate them more, but I don't know about the kiwi.
But like kōkako.
So, yeah. So what I'm going to do, I'll just wait for them to leave. So what we'll do is that the programmer said cup of tea at 3:30, but we should go and have a cup of tea and come back at 3:30. Okay? So be back at 3:30 so
not doing this to be the kill Kiwis. We're actually there to try and do things in a better and more sustainable way. So I support where Kathy's coming from. And I appreciate the fact that it is documented that I don't support residual toxins, and it doesn't make it right that we dump tons of it out the plane every year either, because I don't support that either.
Don't dump it.
No, we don't.
Okay, guys, okay.
But
Noted,
I mean,
noted.
the council uses
Noted.
it, you know,
Yep.
and I don't support that either, and
Noted.
that's my right not to support it, so that's it.
Okay. Did you want to say something to that, Patrick? Because I don't want to deliberate going on around resistance.
Sorry, Councillor Litchwa, just on your point of the work that we did through the conservation, the community conservation and restoration committee thing. So I'm not sure if you're at the meeting or not, but Janine Becker is leading a review of the Natural Heritage Partnership Program, as well as all of the other contestable funding for the council. And it will be done in line for the next LTP, so there will be an opportunity to feed in and look at the criteria and the rounds and the timing and the amounts of money and all that sort of stuff.
Thank you. Last one, Stu?
I know I was going to move the next one, the last one when you've done
Okay,
this.
so we've got a mover and a seconder for this. We've had some deliberations. You've noted all the korero from both Kathy and Fred. And I take on board, Fred, you know, if you're not going to start accepting if you're going to start questioning letters of support, then why are we bothering with them? In theory, so maybe in this deliberation that we have going forward is around the letters of support, because there's more than just iwi here. Okay, so we're going to vote on this now. So we all okay? Our mover and seconder. Can I have those in favour of this number 4, number 3, number 4? All those in favour?
Aye.
1, 2, 3. Who was those 2 ayes? Barry?
Yep.
And myself. And all those against? What are you doing? Abstaining?
He just wanted it noted.
Oh, yeah. So support. So all of us on and Kathy's against. Ka pai tēnā. Thank you, Kathy. Next one is that was number 4. The National Heritage over 3 years. Okay. That a Natural Heritage Fund grant of 129,517 over 3 years to Waikato Environment Centre Trust be approved for the Bush to Burbs project. Can I have a mover?
Yeah.
Story.
I've already moved it.
Who seconded? Kathy. Okay, deliberations.
Yeah, so obviously you all heard my concerns that I raised with the applicants, and just I wonder if I could get some feedback from staff on whether number 6 there is able to cover my concerns, because I've had some good conversations with Patrick about those, and so look, I won't repeat them again, but perhaps Patrick could give us some feedback on whether you're comfortable that my concerns will be addressed through that process and the instalment thing.
Yeah.
Or Jody. Yeah.
So if I can quickly summarise it, you know, I think that the grants above number 5 already have all their landowners kind of teed up and ready to go, and this one is about getting more on board. So there's an element of, I guess, uncertainty and risks in that, and can we build something into the funding deed to cover that off if there's big gaping holes and then all the whole landowners don't want to come on board. I think we probably can.
We can. So in all of these applications, when we prepare the funding deed, they have to report every year before they get the next instalment of funding. So we can write into the funding deed some conditions around the monitoring, which they are planning to do with this project. So we can look at doing that. And it's really also about the continuity of contact with the group. I mean, they are local, obviously, so it's quite easy. And we have a lot of contact with GoEco and with Predators Free Cambridge, Predators Free Hamilton as well. So we're going to be right on top of this project all the way through.
I was a bit surprised at how low they said their initial monitoring RTC was. Was that done professionally, or was it just their own?
No, it was done by Qualmont.
Oh, was okay.
That's right.
Yeah,
So,
that
So
seems.
same as our.
yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
My understanding is, I think that it was low because you're not getting the possums, from around the area from
Yeah,
Waikato.
it's got between the lake and the Maunga, so.
Yeah.
Pretty low immigration.
Okay.
And there's none coming across the dam from Whitehall, so.
Ka pai tēnā?
Yeah, no,
Yep.
I'm happy, thanks.
Okay. Barry?
I just had, and this is the one I just thought, is it useful? I actually support it, but I wondered whether we should just put in the deed that there should be annual reports, and it's subject to maybe satisfactory annual reports. From what staff are saying and what I've heard from councillors, of all of the applications, this is the one where we're not absolutely sure that it's going to end up with the right outcomes after 3 years. So I just wondered whether it was useful to put in there into the deed the annual report requirement, and you might have that in there already, but it should be subject to that so that we have a fallback position. Just comments on that from councillors would be useful.
Barry, number 5 says that all grants be subject to 1, the preparation of the funding deed, 2, each annual instalment of the grant be conditional upon the satisfactory evaluation by staff of annual progress reports from the applicant.
We're covered then. I'm more than happy.
Okay, ka pai tēnā. So, we're going to move in a second for that one. All those in favour? No one against? Ka pai tēnā. So I've just gone through number 5. I'm happy to move both of them together because unless, it's number 5 here. Sorry guys, it's number 6 online, it's number 5 in my sheet.
Yeah,
so Barry, that answers what you were asking.
No, I'm happy to second that part.
So
Absolutely.
I'll move it in, the chief will second it. You have a question around something?
Yes, whilst Patrick's in the room, it's more for information for councillors.
Yes.
Again, I want to advocate for the West Coast.
Oh, yeah.
If I have leave of the chair to be able to do that. I mean, if I have permission of the chair, can I advocate for the West Coast? And in that West Coast, no, the region, West Coast, it's actually Waipa, but it's not about geographical areas so much.
So before we, so what's that got to do with number 6? Nothing. So we'll come back to that in a second. So all those in favour of number 6? Anybody against? Ka pai. So that's all of it done, Koto. Thank you for your day. Thank you for all the work you guys have put into this. I would have thought a lesson is learned each time, every year you bring this up. There's always those, those continuous debates around some things and some things. So we're looking forward to what you said, Patrick, about the review on the applications. This will be really, really good, especially some parts where mana whenua is inclusive. Yep, that's excellent. So before we go away, I don't know why you can't advocate for West Coast at all.
It's just that because we've got such a low population base, and I'm talking down around Awakino area, and as I learned today about what the pigs have been eating in large numbers, and that was what's the name of the frog, Patrick?
Archie's frog.
Archie's frog. And the kiwi and all the other biodiversity values that we've got down there that are being destroyed. And the reason that they're being destroyed is because we haven't got a population base like we have on the Coromandel to care. Well, of course people care, but we haven't got the resources to do anything about protecting them. And I'm just trying to work out how the Regional Council, who is in charge of biodiversity values along with DOC, could put some more emphasis into these areas where we have real hotspots of biodiversity and nothing much is happening. And it's just a think piece really for people to,
There's heaps going on down there.
Thank you.
There's heaps, but yeah, you're right. there's not as many people. So, I mean, essentially this, what you're seeing is the social component of it, you know. But there's no big population bases down there, and no one retires down Ngāwakina. They will go and retire up in the Coromandel. So
We haven't got a bus service, Angela.
So before this conversation gets out of line, guys, I want to close the meeting down officially, and this conversation can continue over there.